Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Journeys to Belonging. Today on my podcast, I have someone who I've recently gotten to know, but we have a lot in common. And so I'm really excited to have her on my show today. Sherry MacKay, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So I didn't really say too much about you, otherwise other than the teaser I gave, which is the fact that we have a lot in common, and I
hmm
think people will realize that once you start talking about yourself. So please tell our listeners more about what you're doing, what you have been doing, and how you got here.
Sure. Thank you so much, Eileen. Yes. Well, our connection is ESL, English as a Second Language, and in
Mhm.
the TESOL community. And I guess going back to how I even got started in this community is, it's interesting how people find their path. But
Right.
I had finished an undergrad BA in sociology, and I'm originally from Canada. This was in a small city outside of Toronto, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I ended up getting this job with the Dean of Agriculture, and I was interviewing graduate students and professors about their research, and then writing articles, for
Mhm.
the community.
Right.
And a lot of the graduate students I was meeting were men, international, that were from different countries. And the more I
Mhm.
talked to them, the more I learned about how they had come to Canada with their wives, but their wives were really having a difficult time. They were
Wow.
isolated. Some of them didn't speak English. For some of them, it was their
Mhm.
first experience with snow. They left their families, they left everything, and their husbands were feeling guilty because they were really busy with their research. So
Yeah.
I just thought, well, let's bring these women together. So that's how
Mhm.
I started. So we would get together and have like one week, maybe a cooking lesson from them. And then I would do some kind of a, very, some kind of an English class, but I had no training in how to teach English. They
Right.
might teach us, there were like, women from different countries. So teaching different languages. And I just thought,
Mhm.
how can I make this a career? This is what I was really passionate about. So a lot of people get into ESL because they're like great with languages and linguistics. I'm not that person, but it was more about this. We need to get these people together to learn. And then
Mhm.
obviously when you're in a new country, language is key. So I went and
Sure.
got my BEd. And then my first job was in Toronto with a program called LINK, which is Language Instruction for Newcomers. And I taught English to, I was in my neighborhood, I had students from all parts of the world.
Mhm.
So new immigrants and refugees. So I had students from Japan and Guatemala and Afghanistan and Korea and different parts of Africa. I loved it. I loved that position. And then uh, got married and we moved to Riverside, California, which is in Southern California. And I worked
Okay.
here in the University UC Riverside in international education programs, in teaching, in teacher training, and program development. And I
Mhm.
really loved it. There's a lot of diversity. And again, I just always love working with international students.
Right.
Then in 2012, we moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And in Albuquerque, I got involved with a program called the Refugee Well-Being Project. And this is out of the sociology department with Dr. Jessica Goodkind.
Mhm.
And this study's been going on for a number of years. And what they do is they interview all new refugees to the area. And they're either part of the control or experimental group. Any
Mhm.
participant has access to any therapy if they need that, if they're really in, suffering
Nice.
from PTSD. All of them have access to that. But what
Right.
they do is they're then partnered with undergraduate students. So
Mhm.
they have a class that's for 2 quarters, and the students learn about the countries where the refugees are coming from. So at
Oh,
that time, they
nice.
were coming from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Democratic Republic of Congo.
Mhm.
And so they learn about those countries, they learn about the resettlement program. And that's when I learned about the whole resettlement process in the US and really the little support that newcomers receive.
Wow.
I couldn't get over it. So, I, 3 months, 3 months of support from the government, having to pay back their flight, their plane tickets, that's a loan,
Mhm.
and just getting started up. So the undergrad students eventually, so they learn about all these steps to the resettlement process, and
Right.
then they're partnered up, and they're the advocate for a family. So, for example,
Mhm.
um, one family had a couple advocates, one for the parents and one for the three kids. And two of the children one had severe physical disabilities. The other
Mhm.
um, also had some, we'll say, learning disabilities. And then they had this other boy who was like this soccer star. And so the advocate, what she did for him was she raised money and got him, cleats and everything he needed to join a local soccer league. And eventually
Mhm.
he was spotlighted, and people made sure that he was able to get into this elite um, league.
Wow.
And he was only able to do it because of that connection with that student.
Right.
Um, and what we did, so there were a lot of aspects to this. So the students worked uh, for jobs. There were doctors in Iraq who needed to go back and do certain testing. They helped them with that, helping the kids with their school. And we
Mhm.
would meet once a week in a learning circle. And the learning circle was a time to share and to learn. And the
Okay.
advocate and so the kids had their own program. I worked with the kids one year, the second year with the adults. And with the adults, um, they'd have different themes. So maybe I remember like the one family, they wanted to understand more about parenting and disciplining in the
Okay.
US and what was appropriate, inappropriate. And so we had interpreters and had a discussion around that. We had discussions
Mhm.
around healthcare, around Martin Luther King Day. We celebrated together and talked about the importance of that here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So just a lot of sharing. I loved this model. And
Mhm.
then in 2015, I moved back to Riverside. And a week before I had moved back, a very dear friend of mine, Celine Nielsen Yildiz, had moved back. And Celine
Mhm.
had lived in Des Moines. We met in Riverside. She had lived in Des Moines, worked with a resettlement agency there, and then was teaching at a university in Eastern Turkey. And she was teaching the year when many Syrians were crossing over into Turkey, and
Sure.
very close to her university, there was a large refugee camp. And she started getting involved there. So anyway, she did a lot of work there. She continues to do work
Mhm.
there. She came back, and at that time, exactly at that time, there was that photo of that drowned boy, the
Yes.
Syrian boy, and
Mhm.
the soldiers picking him up. And so we were just like, what's going on, and what can we do?
Mhm.
And we just gathered with some friends, very informally, and I think like 10 days later, it was the United Nations International Day for Peace. So we said, let's
Mhm.
have a peace walk. So with that peace walk, we started our organization. We co-founded Globally Connected. And Globally Connected, the mission for Globally Connected was to promote community building in order to support refugees.
Okay.
And I worked with Globally Connected up until just a little over a year ago. And with Globally Connected, one of the main programs was our ESL class.
Mhm.
So with the ESL, I mean, I
Yeah.
can, I don't know, so yeah, so with
Yeah,
this
that's
ES,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's really interesting to to hear your journey. So I'm, keep going. I think our listeners will want to know. So where did you end up, kind of thing. Yes, go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So with Globally Connected, we started here. We have a couple of adult schools, I'll say that,
Hmm.
but either they don't provide childcare or students need some basic literacy.
Right.
And then here where we live, transportation is not ideal, public transportation.
Mhm.
So I started with
Mhm.
4 women. I started a class, and we had volunteers pick up the women, bring them to the class, and we had volunteers help with childcare.
Right.
And we were meeting 2 hours twice a week, which is very little. So at the beginning, I was like, okay, we need to get serious. We only have 2 hours. We need to get
Mhm.
down to the language learning. And then halfway through, they'd be like, oh, okay, they bring out their tea, and oh, we're going to have some tea and chat in our first language. So I'm like, well, okay, they're adults. What am I going to do? Right. So I'm like, okay,
Right.
but we're going to keep this short because we need to get on with this. then after some time, I realized, oh my gosh, like they were sharing so much at that time and how
Mhm.
important it was for them to come together,
Right.
with, people from their own country and that could speak their language, and then with the
Right.
volunteers. And the class grew. And I think, over time we had probably easily 30 students
Oh, wow.
coming through, um, mostly Afghans, a few
Mhm.
Syrian, a woman from India, but always women. And we would always start in the circle.
Mhm.
And I really felt that was important. And we started in the circle.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do it started with kind of like introductions and a lot of repetition
Mhm.
because we had learners, um, truly all levels of literacy. So we
Right.
had like one woman who had never held a pencil in her life, to a woman who was a director of a private school in her country. Um,
Amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a huge gap. And all adults, of course, all adult women. So of course they're the way you teach them, the way, the way they interact with you and each other is different.
definitely. So, but it was really, I felt important that we started as a
Mm-hmm.
community and share different things, and then we'd break into groups. But I also soon learned that they all pretty much had some kind of physical ailments,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of issues with the gut, chronic back pain,
Oh,
headaches.
wow.
And then I also just started hearing their stories and, kind of trauma that they'd experienced in their countries, and then just the ongoing stress of resettlement.
Right. Yeah. So
And
let me kind of stop you there because we're going to get into all of that through my questions, but that's okay. But what I wanted to do was start with my usual first
Mm,
question, which is for you personally, if I say the word belonging or feeling a sense of belonging, what comes to mind?
right. So it's really like be able to show up as yourself and accepted as
Hmm.
yourself within, a community.
Right.
Um, Yeah, so for even like for when I moved from Canada to the US, you could
Hmm.
say, okay, not a big deal. But I came with my husband's, basically my visa was dependent on his visa. And I couldn't work at first. And I'd left a job I loved and my family, my friends, and my
Hmm.
culture. And I moved to Riverside, and I didn't know when I'd be able to work. So I joined
Hmm.
something at the university called the International Women's Group. And I just always, where I went, wanted to find people who
Hmm.
obviously accepted me, and that I just, there was like a respect and a mutual
Sure.
appreciation for one another in a group.
Right. Yeah. So obviously, from all that you've been talking about so far, including that, personal feeling, this idea of community is extremely important to you, and you've used that to inform what you do with your adult students, with the newcomers. So I want to go back to the story that of your journey, and
Mhm.
you were beginning to talk about the whole idea of women having health issues, the trauma
Mm.
that they had been through. You had realized that I can teach them the English language content, but there also needed to be, I guess, would you call it a balance with some of the other things? So go back to that. Talk to me a little bit about the trauma, and what were you able to do, or what can we do in those situations where newcomers are coming with little English possibly, and very difficult lives?
Definitely. Yeah. So I, it's a lot, right? As a teacher, we're
Mm,
not trained how to deal with, like, we'll say, big emotions. I was
right.
fortunate that, one, we were all women. Two,
Mhm.
I didn't, it was basically it was our program, our curriculum. I didn't have any pressure from above that certain standards had to be met, certain tests had to be taken. So I had a lot of freedom and liberty. Um,
Mhm.
and in saying that, we really gave the women the space, and I felt to emote honestly when they needed to.
Mhm.
And I did it because I felt that they, well, one, they were able to open up because they really trusted us, but also
Mhm.
even some of the volunteers in the program had background. Like I had one woman
Yeah.
who was volunteering who was a marriage and family therapist. I had another woman who would volunteer. She was a pastor. I had people that really were able to provide that support.
Oh, nice.
Um, so, but in saying that, I still felt we needed more. And I
Mm-hmm.
connected with a local psychiatrist, Dr. Marianne Shepper, and she
Mm-hmm.
had just come back from Lebanon. She
Oh.
had gone, I think she's gone 2 or 3 times now, and
Mm-hmm.
working with a group of Syrian women, and she continues to do teletherapy. And then she found out there was something happening locally, so we connected with her,
Oh,
and
wonderful.
she came to our class over, I think it was like 10 months. She'd
Mm-hmm.
come once a month and provide strategies around coping with stress,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of talking about the brain and what happens when we're under a lot of stress. We did meditation. She brought in, like, we connected to the senses. We did this whole thing around smelling different things, and
Mm-hmm.
really opened up. And for the women, it was extremely powerful. Um,
Right.
one and there's a few things. One, they were just really grateful for these strategies, like, and actually we also did something called the O'Connor really resiliency scale. So we did have the women do this scale at the beginning and how they felt they were coping midway through at the end.
Oh,
um,
that's interesting. That'd make a great study. Yeah.
yeah, so we haven't really actually done anything formal with
Mm-hmm.
it yet, but we just wanted to and obviously, and the most important thing at the beginning was to show these women, like, oh my gosh, like, you're
Mm-hmm.
incredibly resilient and strong, and not, just for them to even recognize their own strength, because sometimes they
Right.
didn't see that.
Right.
So that was really powerful.
Can I
Working with them.
ask you for that resiliency study? What are some of the things that they ask or they look for? We use the word resilience, but I don't know that we all understand exactly what that means, especially for newcomers, those who have come out of difficult situations, as especially as adults. It's not as easy for them to bounce back. So, in terms of resilience, because obviously midway through, if you did it at the beginning, midway through, and then at the end, you could see changes. So first, what does that look like? What does the resilience look like in terms of practical kinds of things? And then what did you notice in terms of the interventions that you did? I guess they were interventions, right?
Right.
For the women to see if there was value for those interventions.
Right. So I can't remember the exact, like, the wording, but it was kind of just even like, it was like giving yourself a rating on how
Mm-hmm.
well you were able to even kind of like bounce back after certain things happen in
Gotcha.
your life.
Sure.
How confident you feel in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I can go and look at the resiliency scale, but I will say
That's okay.
qualitatively, what we gained was, like, talking to the women,
Mm-hmm.
different things. Like, one woman was going through an extremely stressful situation. She'd been in a car accident, and
Oh
I
my.
knew that they had also talked about what they did for themselves, right, to
Mm-hmm.
take care of themselves and their emotional well-being. And so I knew that prayer was important for all of these women, and especially for this woman.
Interesting.
And so I kind of assumed she was going to say that, well, I'm praying a lot, but she said, I've been breathing. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like,
Oh.
oh, like Dr. Marianne taught us, take deep breaths, to
Oh
sit and
wow.
wait before I just say, just. And then another woman said the same thing, that she started in the morning. She would wake up, go to her balcony, and just really take in deep breaths and kind of and give gratitude for the start of a new day. Really powerful. The other
Awesome.
thing that actually, the one thing they said that was, I guess, most transformative for them was when
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Marianne, who they saw as a successful, professional, educated woman,
Mm-hmm.
shared her own challenges. When she shared her own vulnerability, her
Oh.
own struggles, and how she got
Mm-hmm.
through them. And they're just like, oh, that's something we just don't do that, right? We, you've got to always be strong. And
Oh wow.
so,
Yeah, you have to
uh,
appear that way, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
So that really allowed them, like, to feel like, oh, I can also share and
Amazing.
open up. So that was yeah, I definitely could see a huge change with them.
Big aha moment for them. Yeah.
For sure. And even before Dr. Marianne started
Hmm.
coming, just honestly coming together as a community was
Right.
huge.
Right.
And the one thing we did in 2019 was we connected with a nonprofit that's a literary organization here, and they sent a facilitator for the women to write poetry once a month and to share their stories. So as I said, some of
Oh,
these women,
nice.
very limited English, but there was always, because it was a multi-level class, we
Mm-hmm.
would have them maybe just tell their story, their poem, and their friend would write it in Pashto or Farsi, and then we would translate it.
Okay.
And we did that with the women and with the women, with the students and the
Mhm.
volunteers, because we're a community, right? The community involved all of us,
Right.
and I said at the beginning of the book that the volunteers, some of them were more hesitant to write the poetry than the women. So a woman who has no literacy skills,
Interesting.
you asked her to write a poem, and she was all about it. So I don't know if I can share a poem, but it kind of also talks to what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Sure, go
book is
ahead.
called "The Stranger Is My Friend,"
Okay.
and this was a poem written by six of the women: Ziagul,
Okay.
Farishta, Nazreen, Adila, Mabuba, and Famida.
Go ahead.
Right. When I came to this strange country, this strange place, every day I'm so upset. The tears flow on my face. I miss my country and my family and my old home. My eyes stay red with crying. I feel so alone. When suddenly I think about how hard and difficult this all is, and a person appears in front of me, just like this, and changes my sadness and makes my pain pass. And we come together in class and laugh and laugh and laugh.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
so powerful.
So it just speaks to how important the role of a teacher is, right?
Yes.
We're often the first person, and especially for, I'll say again, women,
Mm-hmm.
like with the women in my class, all their husbands were working. Most of their husbands had very good English skills. They worked with the U.S. military, um, but for these women, and they have children, they would connect with people from their community, and that
Yes.
would be it. And then they came to the English classroom, and then that opened up a whole new world. Um,
Right.
and, uh, and this idea, like I always think about, like, where somebody's staying at home in isolation. It's really hard to like break out of that kind of sadness and despair alone. So coming together.
Yes.
So I definitely switched from my, like, initial, we've got 2 hours of English and we're going to be studying English, to, oh, no, 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 no. This is a community. And within this
Mm-hmm.
community, we're going to study English together.
Right. And did you find as a result that they learned more of the language as because they were relaxed, they were using it to socialize?
Definitely, definitely. And when
Yeah.
when people are sharing from their heart, they
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to communicate it, right? And so those are the words. Those are the definitely. And for some of the women, it took a long time to produce, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but they talked about how much they could understand. The beginning, like literally, there was like
Okay.
they felt that there was like nothing. It was just
Mm.
gobbledygook, shall I say?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but over time, uh, first, yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
receptive skills were very strong, and then with time, more production.
Right. Yeah. It was interesting. One of my previous podcast guests is Tan Nguyen, and he teaches in, right now he's in Bangkok, Thailand, but he was talking about the importance of home language and, their native language. So I know that you mentioned that the first indication you had of the fact that they needed to socialize was them taking out their tea cups and tea and starting to talk to each other in their native or home language. What value have you seen in practical terms of them being able to use that language in order to be able to learn English or another language?
So using their first language. You're
Yes.
saying, yeah. So, like I said, when I always felt like I wanted a balance between, well, you say accuracy and fluency, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you need to teach to the level they're at. You don't want to overwhelm a person, all right?
Right.
But when the person is an adult with, abstract
Mm-hmm.
concepts and they really want to share something from their heart,
Mm-hmm.
one, I don't want the language to be the barrier to that.
Right.
So I want them to be able to express in their first language if need be. But
Mm-hmm.
like I said, when they are expressing from the heart, they want to know those words. So things like we would go around and we would introduce ourselves and we might give an adjective to describe ourselves. So I am whatever. I'm powerful. I'm strong. I'm smart. I'm beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are not beginner level words. But
Right.
when that's you, and then if every person's repeating, like, whatever,
Yes.
Sherry is creative and Eileen is, and then you're hearing it again and again about yourself. Oh, okay, you're going to really own
Right.
that word because that's who
Mm-hmm.
you are. So it is this, like, I do feel you need to have a balance. And I know our field has gone from the, like, okay, knowing, no first language in the classroom to yes, we can have it. And I do feel like there needs to be this balance. So that's why
Right.
in the learning circle, we would definitely have different languages because sometimes I needed to share something, even happening in the community or some news, whatever it was, um, that had to be in the first language because I wanted to be certain that they understood it. Um,
Right.
but, you always want them to obviously to be learning the language, the new language.
Sure. Yeah. You've mentioned several times about starting off the class in a circle and talking in these circles for obviously for a sense of belonging and so forth. Being in a circle is really important. Was there a particular reason that you chose starting with the circle? Did the circle represent to you or represent to them, in terms of why you started the class each time that way?
Yeah, it went back to, the experience I had in Albuquerque with the learning circles, but I love this idea of everyone seeing each other because so many
Nice.
classrooms, you see somebody's back,
Oh,
right?
that's
Or you
right.
see the side,
Yes.
but here we're all facing each other.
Right.
There's an openness to that, an openness in your
Mm-hmm.
body. And so just, yeah, seeing each other and that we all start together as a community, right? We
Mm-hmm.
are a community,
Right.
and we really want to see you and hear from you.
Yeah.
And then we can like break into the groups and then get down to the language learning. But
Right.
this circle is a powerful way of really everyone being seen and heard. And we would always do something where it could be just a quick introduction,
Mm-hmm.
an introduction and where you're from, an introduction, where you live now, whatever it may be, right?
Right.
Sometimes a circle was, I mean, I really am and so what else kind of this maybe as a segue into, where my passion has led me is really creating a community for teachers. Um, because I think we all, there's a lot of talk now around trauma informed practice, right?
Yes.
Looking at the whole learner, social
Mm-hmm.
emotional learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel that this is key. And starting in the circle, I think is part of it, right? It's part of this, that
Absolutely.
you're a community. It can't just be about the academics because
Right.
when my students walk through the door, I mean, it was very difficult for them to get right to the language learning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a lot going on. Sometimes they'd be sharing what happened in the news the night before. Maybe they hadn't been able to reach a family member, and there had been a
Mm-hmm.
bomb in that part of the city.
Yes.
There was, how could we expect a learner to just get to
They
learning?
can't just, yeah, they can't just
Yeah,
put all that aside and say, okay, now I'm in the classroom, and so I'm not going to think about those things. It would be lovely if we could compartmentalize our
yeah,
brains like that. But that's why they emphasize the whole, which you just spoke about, the whole social emotional learning and the fact that we need to establish these relationships through these communities because they're coming into a situation that's uncomfortable for them, learning a new language and putting themselves out there, making mistakes and things like that. That can be very stressful. And on top of the personal stress that they're having, So you're right. You need to overcome all of that. So yes, that's where I wanted to go next. So you have established transformational learning communities. You're putting that together right now. So I'd love for you to talk about that and the move into training teachers or supporting teachers in different ways in order for them to understand the things that you've come to know.
Right. Like I said, I've been so fortunate to work with people like Dr. Marianne,
Mm-hmm.
with the literary facilitators, and I see the power of this, right? And like I said, my always my thing has been, and I think of people in isolation, I want to bring people together. And I think in our field in particular, in
Mm-hmm.
ESL teachers, some of them work for a school district, some of them work for a college, some of them work for a nonprofit, some for a resettlement agency,
Mm-hmm.
somewhat of a church, somewhat of a synagogue, some are like, so some
Yes.
have
Mm-hmm.
support, but a lot of teachers don't, and they're just kind of getting on their own and trying to figure it
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
And I know that there are so many people doing amazing things right now around trauma
Yes.
informed practices, creativity in the classroom, like movement. I talk about like, the outside of the inside. Sometimes it would be like literally like shaking it off. You'd be doing a meditation, but like, and so if we could come together, um, and this is what I'm starting, to learn from each other, to support each other, to uplift each other, I just think it's going to serve our students. And then, if you think about, serving your students, of course, the ripple effect.
Right.
But really, always everything comes down to ourselves also, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so if you're a giver, and that means if you're a teacher, you're giving a lot. So also it's like, taking care of yourself. And that's like sometimes
Absolutely. Especially
having,
these days, but always,
oh
yes.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. And often, people that get into this field are very compassionate people, have big hearts, are empaths, and it can be very draining, right?
Well,
So
you
I would
see the
love,
burnout, yes.
yeah,
Burnout and just the exhaustion, really.
right. So like I said, I don't have a background in psychology, psychiatry, um, trauma practice. Have I read a lot? Yes. Um, but I feel like teachers, unlike social workers, we didn't get that training on how to kind of have a container for ourselves, for our classroom that's safe, what to do when
Mhm.
big emotions come up. Um, because we don't, I don't think we don't want to brush it under anything. We don't want to like suppress, but we want to feel confident that we know what to do when this happens.
Absolutely. You're so right, Sherry.
So with transformational learning communities, the vision is really just to create to come together as a community, kind of teachers to uplift each other, to learn from each other. We'll be providing some
Mhm.
classes and some workshops, but really we're just starting this Facebook community, and we wanted to a place, yeah, as I said, just to share and to learn from each other.
Yeah. And I love that the initials are TLC.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It started with ESL and TLC, and I'm going to see because you know, this psychiatrist we're working with, she's like, well, maybe it could go to other communities. And
Mhm.
without a doubt, a lot of what we're doing and a lot of what I've been reading on trauma
Mhm.
informed, a lot of it's for K through 12, but a lot of that is still applicable
Oh, of
for,
course. And you've been
yeah,
using it with adult women students, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you know that it works. But we
definitely.
tend we tend to sort of look at it as K to 12 or K to 16 or just university or adult ed, all the time, just does it fit here, does it fit here? But when we're talking trauma informed practice and social emotional learning, it really, I think these days we already know that it obviously is useful for everybody. But I love the fact
Exactly.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, I love the fact that you're beginning to focus on, or that you want to focus on, the teacher. And it's so fascinating, the journey that you've taken in all practical senses, because as you've said, you're not trained in those particular fields. You sort of became trained or well read in them because they're a passion for you. And as far as somebody looking to see where our passions can lead us, they can lead us to really amazing things. And sometimes we have to think about, okay, I may not have the degree, but in many ways I'm still qualified, or I'm going to connect like you have
Mhm.
to people who do have the qualifications and figure out how we can network and work together to make that happen. So tell me a little bit more. I know that you're just starting to work on TLC as a project, as something hopefully for the future. What do you hope that will look like? What are the things you're working on right now? And can our listeners get involved in any way yet? And if not, when can they get involved with what you're doing?
Right. I started with a Facebook group last summer, and I was pretty excited. And uh, different teachers came in, not always like adult ed ESL instructors, but different
Mhm.
teachers. Um, but at that time, honestly, there wasn't a lot of traction, and I feel like teachers were like they were getting geared up for the fall. They
Yeah.
were overwhelmed,
Overwhelmed.
and then
Yeah.
and honestly, then I had something personal happened that took me away for a number of months.
Hmm.
So that Facebook has been kind of sitting dormant, but I want to start that again with Dr. Marianne and her daughter Julie, Dr. Julie Estrella, who's
Hmm.
also a therapist. We're going to do a master class. We don't have a date yet, but we're looking at the beginning of April for teacher burnout, which sounds so.
Awesome.
Oh, but we hope to like think about like more of that the ignite, that spark that's still
Hmm.
there. You're going to ignite that.
Right.
I kind of want to take from more of an abundance rather than a lack
Yes.
sense of lack place.
Hmm.
So teachers are struggling. I know it's near the end of the year, but we can still,
This is a
gain some
perfect time, I
strategies.
think. Yes, I think this is a perfect time. I don't know if you've heard of Clubhouse. I haven't really been able to jump on too much, but that's another possibility. Although Facebook seems to be really popular with educators, but Clubhouse seems to have been getting a lot of traction also. But if you already
Yeah.
have but if you already have the Facebook group, you might want to
Well,
head to
and I
that
know that
first.
Facebook people, not everybody's crazy about Facebook, but at this
Right.
point, this is a platform. And I'll say, just to share a funny story from TESOL 2019, I hadn't gone to a convention for years. I went on the last day. There was a session, something like mindfulness in the classroom or whatever it was. I was like, okay, perfect. This is exactly what I'm interested in. I
Mm-hmm.
go, I don't know, there might have been 50, 60 people in the room. We're waiting, and the presenters never show up.
Oh, how
Like,
awful. Oh, that
I'm like, what the
happens
heck?
sometimes. Yes,
Right.
that's, oh my
But then I'm just
goodness.
looking around. I'm like, I bet you people in this room have something to say. So I don't know. I got inspired and I
Yay
got
for
up.
sharing. Good for
And
you.
so I'm like, okay. I said, like, kind of share what I was doing in my classroom. If other people, and so people got up and they were sharing books they had written, things that I have been doing. And then out of that, a few of us continued the conversation after, these conventions, people get excited.
Nice.
And then the one woman who seemed to be the more tech friendly one, she's like, I really don't like Facebook. Let's start a Yahoo group. So anyway, needless to say, that Yahoo group fell flat because it is just not user friendly. It's
No,
not.
it isn't.
For now, Facebook. I have been invited to Clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
I have been hesitant just because I think, oh my gosh, more social media, and do I want to
Mm-hmm.
step into
I
something
know.
else? But I am intrigued, and
Yeah.
yeah, who knows? Whatever's going to be the easiest way for teachers to connect and for it to be
Yeah.
meaningful. The last thing I want to do is to have something that's like, oh gosh, this is something else I'm part of. No, I want this to be, oh my
Right.
gosh, this is something I'm part of, and this is alleviating my stress, or it's like giving me some ideas, giving me
Yes.
some excitement to use this
Yes.
strategy or whatever it may be in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that could be so powerful for those who are listening. I definitely want to be sure that when this episode comes out, that's included. The link is
Mhm.
included in the show notes, and that we continue to put that out. Are you on any other social media besides Facebook? Are you on Twitter or anything like that?
No, but
Okay.
I think it's time for me to have an Instagram account.
Oh, well, I don't know. For me, Instagram is
Twitter?
good. Instagram is good, but Twitter is an amazing
Okay.
platform
Okay.
for professional learning networks and professional learning communities. I highly advise it. If you're going to start off with
Okay.
anything, I would
Okay.
say, yeah, definitely Twitter. But don't let me steer you, and for me, I like Instagram, but because it's so photo based or video
Right.
based, sometimes what you're talking about doesn't necessarily have that photo attached to it and to have to create something with it. But that's just me.
True.
So,
Well,
yeah.
and in all honesty, I'll share now. I would love to start a podcast, and I want to start a podcast. It's similar to what you're doing, but it's
Mhm.
I want to bring in kind of best practices. So people who are
Right.
either educators or researchers or
Hmm.
people doing other kinds of projects working um, with refugee and immigrant populations. And
Yeah.
then what I would love to hear from is also the our students, right? And the what has helped
Yes.
them, what has supported them, what has been successful for them,
Yes.
to share that with teachers, because we have to
Hmm.
hear everyone's, obviously we just learn from each other. So hearing,
Sure. And everybody has a story to tell, which is really important in terms of their learning and their experiences. That would be really an awesome podcast. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because I want to know, like, when is it that kind of like they feel like belong, like when,
Hmm.
like, for a refugee, like when is it, like when was that turning point? Because
Hmm.
I moved to the US, but you could say it was my choice, right? I moved to a new country.
Okay. Yeah,
um,
sure.
right.
Yeah.
But I also, like, I went through a resettlement process, you'll say. um,
Hmm.
not but I mean, not resettlement, but getting situated in a new home.
Acclimated, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Acclimated
um,
to a slightly different culture and certainly a different community without your family. So there were some
right.
parallels. Yeah.
Some parallels, but of course, I could travel back and they could come and
Hmm.
visit.
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
but it's just hearing from everyone,
Right.
all those, so it's from the student and the educator,
Hmm.
and learning from each other
Right.
so that we
Yeah.
can have best practices.
That's true. Yeah, that's great. Sherry, this has been awesome. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or any other advice that you wanted to give our listeners we hadn't touched upon?
And the only thing I'm thinking about is this idea of, and I haven't really talked about perceptions. So
Mm-hmm.
when perceptions around refugees. So I think, I
Right.
mean, there of course, with the US, not of course, but there has been definitely in the media a lot of
Mm-hmm.
fear and the images they portray. Um, but also, I think for a lot of people who decide, like, I'd say even maybe a few of the volunteers who, got involved with the organization, there was I'll say a pity, kind of like, oh, poor people, this, not. The perceptions that I've heard some of from the Afghan families was that they would not be accepted, that the Americans don't like them, and they would not be able to wear their scarves and all these kinds of things. And there was a lot of fear that Americans, kind of no family values, whatever it may be. Um,
Interesting.
but when we came together in the classroom, like, it just, everything shifted.
Yeah.
And I mean, for one, I don't think I've laughed harder than I think I have with the women in my class, right? So it's not like when I talk about trauma informed, it's not that we are spending our entire class like, oh, whoa, is like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
that it's
Yeah,
all about
they
stress.
have lives, they
Oh
have
my,
experiences, good things happen. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So it's like also like sharing the joys. Like,
Right.
we had baby showers for, we had one that was for one of the volunteers and one of the
Uh-huh.
Afghan women at the same time. So, again, we are sure, because often they don't give presents until after the baby comes,
Mm-hmm.
but they were very open. We made sure it was okay. They were very open. They were excited to be
Yeah.
prepared when the baby came. So
Yeah.
it's again, like, I don't want to. I just want to kind of shift the focus from that. It's not all like, oh my
Right.
gosh, like, um,
Right.
heaviness and
Mm-hmm.
sadness. That it's coming together, and that's It's freaking life, right? We sometimes we have a day that we're ready to laugh, and others we want to
Yes.
cry, and that's for every one of us.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
But just, that culturally responsive, that awareness of the background of our students. And that
mm-hmm,
doesn't matter whether they're adults or young or they're local or newcomers, but being aware of their situations and their stories, willing to listen to their stories, joyful, not joyful, and then coming together, the most important thing, which you keep repeating, which I love, which is this whole idea of forming a community, creating those relationships with the newcomers, the people in the community, volunteers, yourself, people you've networked with, and like Dr. Marianne and her daughter. All of that creates this amazing community of warmth and understanding and support. And we're supporting each other. It's not just we're supporting the newcomers. The newcomers are also giving us value. And I love that you've been able to sort of enlighten us about that kind of experience. That's so awesome. So Sherry, where is the best place? I know you're sort of in transition now,
mm-hmm.
moving to the TLC, that transformational learning communities, and getting yourself on social media and so forth. So right now, where is the best place for people to find you or get in touch with you? Is it your email? Is it Facebook, the Facebook group?
Well, definitely email for sure. So it's eslwithtlc@gmail.com,
Okay.
and the Facebook group is there, and they just need to ask to join, and they can be part of it. And that's also ESL with TLC.
Okay, perfect.
The website will be coming soon, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Transformational Learning Communities,
Perfect.
and hopefully a Twitter account. You've sold me. You've sold me.
Yeah, and if you need any help, let me know.
Okay, thanks.
I've presented about
Oh,
becoming part of a PLN and how to do that without feeling overwhelmed on Twitter, because that's what happens sometimes is you feel like you're constantly on it. So yeah, so if you have any questions, I'm here for you. Sherry,
oh,
this has
wonderful.
been
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
It has truly been a pleasure. Thank you.